Thank you, Cassie. Isn't she great? Gotta love that inspiration. And speaking of inspiration, I get the honor and pleasure to introduce our next speaker tonight. You know, we admire that this new revolution of consciousness is here and now and amongst us, moving forward. And we think it's a relatively new phenomena, which it is. But there have been a lot of people for a long time thinking about this. IONS goes back 42 years, but the Theosophical Society goes back 140 years. Founded in 1875 by spiritual seekers Elena Blavatsky and Henry Olcott. The Theosophical Society has endured over all that time with two main branches. The Theosophical Society in America, based right near here in Wheaton, Illinois, and the International Society in Chennai, India. And if you've ever tried to run a spiritual organization, you may have noticed that everything doesn't go exactly the way you had hoped. Enlightened people have a lot of ideas, and sometimes it's hard to get everybody on the same page. Theosophical Society has gone through its ups and downs, some of the most brilliant leaders in the world. And one of the interesting things is never in the history of the Theosophical Society has the same person been the president of the International Society in India and simultaneously the president of the Theosophical Society in America. But as of this last year, that has now changed. And our next speaker is both. And he is reunifying the Theosophical Society, helping the world over with its members, 50,000 strong, in 70 countries around the world, with a common theme. And this gentleman carries what he talks about because he got there through his own spiritual search. Coming through and here in Chicago as a community organizer with groups in his home in Chicago, leading them on till they realized that they had someone with great wisdom, great leadership, and above all, great oratory skills. Please welcome Tim Boyd.
What am I going to do now? Well, good evening, everyone. It's supposed to be a little louder than that now. Come on. Good evening. All right. I've heard that IONS people are live, and I just want you to prove it. Because I can't see you, actually. This is one of the things that's going on. But I'm very, very happy to be here, obviously. The work that's being done by IONS is something that is quite special. I don't think I'm telling you anything you don't know when I say that. This whole idea of bridging this chasm between science as it has come to be known and consciousness is really the movement that's going to take us into something that's going to be quite special as we move ahead. I think everybody feels that. One of the things that I'm finding myself more and more aware of as time goes on is that it's not just me who is feeling certain things about what lies ahead. One of the things that comes with this position that I have recently occupied of being international president for the Theosophical Society, one of the things that it has brought with it is an awful lot of plane rides. So anybody who wants to know anything about any particular airport in the world, just ask me, and I can help you with the information. But along with that, the travel's for a purpose. I mean, the travel is for the purpose of arriving at a place where you find yourself in the presence of others like you, like me. and an opportunity to share and to try and understand what it is that we find ourselves on the cusp of right now. And I don't care where you go, right around now, there are very few people you're going to run into who don't have a sense that something is imminent. And generally, it's something of vast proportions. Something great is on its way toward us. That's a great thing, but like everything else, it can have two sides. So a lot of people are expecting something great, but they're trying to formulate in their minds. They feel it, but the only thing they have to build their image upon is the nightly news. That's a scary image for the future, let me tell you. But, from that point of view, what is this future going to, what is this great thing that I'm sensing within me? What is that going to look like? And then you start to clothe it in the images that you have been fed upon. And so it doesn't look too good. And, someone who would take that perspective, you can't criticize them too much, because they're not making it up that there are strong crises in this world that are facing us. Everybody knows that. I mean, if you just watch the news, it isn't a lie that we are at war with ourselves all around the planet from moment to moment. There's that American Indian expression that no tree is so foolish as to have its branches fight among themselves. But we are. 64 wars going on around the world at any given moment. The statistic that kind of floors me is you have 64 wars and you have 600 different groups involved in those wars. I don't get it. I mean, who do you even know to shoot at if there's But this is what's going on. So you have that. You do have deserts spreading where there used to be fertile land. You have the air, the soil, the water, massively polluted. That's not a fiction. That's something that's for real, and that's in front of us. You also have something that probably, I doubt if many of you are even aware of, even though it's something that has never before even existed in human history. Right now, in fact, as of, I think it was 2009, or I forget the year, there was some moment that occurred where for the very first time in the history of the earth, its population became predominantly urban. There are more people concentrated in cities around the world, and it's growing almost exponentially, than there has ever been in the history of humankind. And that has consequences. So someone who looks at the world and says, this great thing that I sense is something that, based on my understanding, I must fear. And that's a current that's afoot in the world right now. Fear. On the other hand, you have a perspective which is the perspective which groups around the world, such as IONS and others of this sort, are embracing, which is the idea that at this moment, what we stand on the cusp of is a breakthrough in terms of the way that we are able to see and to interact with this world within which we live. A new way of seeing the world through the eyes of consciousness. This elusive term, consciousness. something that will enable changes, that will enable really a restoration of something that we could think of as a natural order, the way we should be behaving toward one another. This is a great thing. And this, I fall on this side. I fall on the ionic side, to make up a word. I fall on the side of ions. That this is where we're going, and it's a necessary thing that's going to happen. I was talking during dinner with Barbara Hubbard. She's out here somewhere. And we were talking about this change that's coming. And as we talked, the idea was, years ago, I used to think that what we're facing, all of these sorts of pollutions and things, it's really terrible because my poor daughter is going to have to live through all of this. Because, of course, I'll be dead and gone. That's the computer models back during my time. Of course, they've upgraded those, and now it's going to be during our time. We're not getting out of it. So, you're in the soup as well as your poor children. But that's where we find ourselves, and, are we going to be able to do it? Are we going to be able to right this ship, to behave in those ways that are just the most natural sorts of ways of behaving in time to avert some of these many crises? I don't know. It's my hope that we will. It's my day-to-day effort to try and stimulate and awaken this consciousness, but I don't know. But I do know this, it's coming. And I also know this, the example that was talking about with Barbara was this. World War II, Pearl Harbor was bombed. America went to war. It took a grand total of 3 days for the entire nation to be put on a footing to face this crisis. That's one avenue along which things can progress. Great scientist, Robert Oppenheimer. He's best known for the work that he did in overseeing the project that produced the atom bomb. But he has a number of interesting quotes, but one of which is this: "The optimist thinks that we are living in the best of all worlds. The pessimist fears that this is true." We have two options in front of us, two things that are going on. So, no matter which way things tip, you can be very, very sure that science, in whatever form it comes to take, is going to be one of the leading edges, one of the things that's going to be leading us into this new world that we will come to inhabit. So, one way or another, we need to figure out and we need to make our peace with science. Oftentimes, when we speak about science and the scientific community and some of the errors in terms of this limitation of thought that has created scientific attention to just this narrow band of reality that we call the material world. It's very easy to categorize that and say that this is something that's off base. But science is such a wonderful thing. It's always progressive, always moving ahead. The way that it moves ahead is by disproving itself from stage to stage. We lived on a flat earth in the past. We lived on an earth that was the center of the universe with all things circling around it in the past. This was scientific wisdom. All of those things have been superseded. The role that is here for us is that many things flow to us in this scientific process. The problem with us is, as with many things, that we are passive recipients. We don't view this as a democratic process. Science is for the experts, and in the words of that Zen saying, to the mind of the experts, there are few options, but to the beginner's mind, there are many. The beginner's mind is the mind that we seek to apply to all things. I have a daughter, she's 22 years old now. And of course, as with anyone's children, Dad, when he offers his pearls of wisdom, it's easier to find better pearls elsewhere. This is just the nature of things. I mean, my daughter loves me. She listens to me to the extent that your child can. But, you say things along the way like, Angelique, you probably want to eat those leafy green vegetables. It's good for you. It gives you vitamins. It's good fiber, all the reasons. Yeah, okay, Dad. But then I've noticed along the way, there will come moments where, on her own, she has a plate of leafy green vegetables, and I'll just watch. I'll have to be quiet. But then I'll ask her, I say, what's changed? She says, well, Dad, I read in the paper, or I saw on TV, a scientist says that leafy green vegetables are good for you. Okay. And it's gotten to the point where I say, Angelique, if I tell you, I know where that one's going to go. But if you hear it from a white man in a white coat, all heaven has spoken. So, in many ways, this is the approach that we take. We're consumers of science. We like the results. We enjoy the cell phones and the toys. We like the little technologies. But for us, it's a somewhat distant process that's involved by those who are versed in such things. It's a mistaken idea. It's also a very unhealthy model to build a life on or to build a world. A lot of my focus, really, I tend to focus more on the spiritual dimension of life. Although very often I choose not even to talk about that. Because very often spirituality and religiosity, it's something where it's very hard it's hard for people to see the differences in those. So nowadays I find myself talking more about consciousness. Because consciousness is universal, just like spirit is universal. Consciousness is one of those things that pervades all, just like anyone's religious perspective about their divine being pervades all. But consciousness and spirituality, that tends to be the focus that is of importance to me, because it's something that is so universal and it's shared. Whether we acknowledge it or not, it's a shared dimension of our being. And so when we talk about science and scientists, who are these scientists? Who are these people that are leading the thought of humanity? Basically, we're talking about women and we're talking about men. Sound like anyone you know? We're talking about people. People who have hopes, people who have fears, people who go to sleep at night and dream dreams, people who have peak experiences of joy, of happiness, of intuitive insight. People who, sitting at home, somehow get a premonition of who's going to call before the phone rings. People just like us. The difference being, in order to be viewed as a contemporary scientist, there's a very specific high level of training that goes into that process. And what has become unfortunate about it has been the fact that these same sorts of inner experiences that are the heritage of anybody that breathes are denied just by virtue of the culture that is not science, the culture that has developed into scientism. Which is to say that if it's about something that's measurable, which consciousness is not, if it's about something that can be seen, touched, tasted, felt, or using instruments that can do the same, we can discuss it. But the one thing, the elephant in the room of consciousness, the one thing that everybody shares, that is required to perform any experiment, that is required to breathe, is the one thing that a practicing scientist, their career will be damaged if you go into those realms. There's something fundamentally wrong with that. Particularly when, even though it's something that is rarely spoken about, it's common knowledge that some of the greatest scientific breakthroughs have occurred as a direct result of dreams, intuitive awakenings, and visions. You know, any of you who ever had to take chemistry probably cursed this fellow by the name of Mendeleev, because you had to learn that periodic table, which didn't even come, he was wrestling with it. He couldn't figure it out. In a dream, the various elements that he was trying to grapple with, he found them dancing, and they set themselves up in a certain pattern. And when he woke up, he wrote it down, and the periodic table, and the reason you probably got a C+ in chemistry, came into being. Niels Bohr, the great quantum physicist, dreamed about the structure of the atom. A central core with, it looked like planets, the electrons going around it, in a dream. The person who is described as the father of neuroscience, a man by the name of Otto Lowy, he had a dream about the nerve impulses, that they were being actually passed by chemical means, not electrical. The problem he had was that he had the dream and woke up and forgot it. That's a problem. Went to sleep the next night. He said, tonight I'm going to remember. Tonight I'm going to remember. Had the exact same dream. Woke up, forgot it again. But on the third night, he captured it. And that's what got him his Nobel Prize. And of course, if we start talking science, the list is never complete unless we mention the name of Albert Einstein. Albert Einstein had a dream when he was a teenager, sledding down a hill. And the sled kept going faster and faster and faster until he felt he reached the speed of light. This is a teenager. And when it reached the speed of light, he said he looked up at the stars. And in looking at the stars, he saw that they were refracting a light that he had never seen. And he said that his entire scientific career was a meditation on that dream he had as a teenager. This is the basis of the most profound revelations to come into the scientific world, yet we are barred from its consideration. So there's a problem with that. It is only a problem in the sense of this undemocratic sort of science. The science that the Buddha talks about, which is to say, accept nothing as true that does not accord itself with your common sense and your experience, no matter who tells it to you, that's a different sort of science. Probably one of the greatest scientists of the 20th century is someone who has gone largely unrecognized. He was a botanist, and he was responsible largely for completely reorienting the agricultural practices of the southern portion of the United States of America, which was involved in monoculture, cotton production. A man by the name of George Washington Carver. Did you study that in school? Probably what you didn't know was the way his scientific method. He was a very religious man, but he would go out to the woods every morning of his life and commune with nature. And as he communed with nature, because he was a religious man, he would also commune with God. So he would ask God what it was that he needed to know for this day. And he would get an answer. And that would be his work for the day. And as a result, he came up with 300 different products you can make from a peanut. You know, he made rubber, paint, face powder, not just food, and revolutionized the agriculture of the South. But one of the things that he said, the thing to me, you know, I maybe cannot go out there and commune directly with the divine in the way that he did. But what he said was this, and I think it's something that we can apply. Anything will give up its secrets to you. Anything will give up its secrets to you if you just love it enough. You got that, right? Anything reveals itself to us if we develop the capacity to be loving. This was his scientific methodology. That's one I can go for. And so I just share that with you just because I think that with the changes that we are faced with the direction that we know we have to go, it's uncertain, it's unsure. Security is a fiction. It doesn't exist anywhere in nature. But one thing we can be sure of, that the greatest safeguard and the greatest source of our future illumination is the capacity that we develop that's already resident within us for love. All of us can do that. And so as the room full of scientists that are going to help to bring this new day about, I only encourage you. There are a lot of things we need to study. But study first that which will most help you to help others. And I'd recommend love as that foundation. You all know how to do it. So with that, I think I've bent your ear enough. I want to thank you.